and welcome to the Dr. Mom Show. It's Dr. D, Mom of 3. I'm so excited that you joined me today, and I'm even more excited because I have an awesome guest with me, Mollie, who is amazing. Today, we are going to be, again, we're hitting up moms this season, all about our busy moms and tips for our moms. So today on the Dr. Mom Show, we'll be talking about how to be a good wife and everything nice. Just a heads up, this is not an R or X-rated show, so it is still safe. If you have your kids at home, it's okay. Nothing risque will be happening on the show. We're just making sure that as busy moms, you continue to be awesome, attractive inside and outside, and just keep that flame and fire in your relationship. So again, don't forget to check me out on drdelenemichalak.com and to subscribe to my YouTube channel, The Dr. Mom Show. Also, on my website, don't forget to pick up my most recent book collaboration, Women of War, Peace in the Midst of the Storm. This is a great book for anybody out there who's going through a battle, a hurdle, and just needs some empowerment. This is 14 women who came together to tell their story and how they got through their struggle. Of course, my fave, The Tripsies and Me, my international best-selling book about my babies and myself in just the first year of life. And then finally, my mom devotional, Meditate, Overcome, Motivate. This is a great 30-day devotional journal just to reiterate to women that we are beautiful, we are strong, we are amazing. A lot of times we forget who we truly are and who God made us to be because we get busy with everything else. So it is just a reminder of how awesome and strong you are and how you have so much purpose to fulfill during your life. So help me welcome our guest today. Woot woot, it's Mollie. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And those books sound amazing. I definitely want to get your Tripsy book like ASAP. That sounds so good.
Isn't Mollie so cute? She's like probably one of my favorite people. So we've only known each other for a few months now, but you know how there's people that you just click with, like you meet them and you're like, this is going to be a lifelong friendship.
Oh yeah, that's a given.
So yes, so I'm so excited to have Mollie on, and you must be wondering, like, who is Mollie and what does she do and how is she going to tell me how to be a good wife and everything nice. So I'm going to let Mollie take the floor and let you hear a little bit more about who she is and what she does.
So hi guys, I'm Mollie Eliasof. I'm a relationship expert. I help specialize in helping high-powered professionals, so doctors, lawyers, CEOs, celebrities, manage, yes, just like Dr. Mom right here, manage to have the same success they have in their career, in their relationship by having successful communication and connection. And so I'm going to help you get more fulfillment out of your role as a wife. And I'm excited for us to break that down.
I love it. Well, we know as busy moms, working moms, career-oriented moms, life gets really busy. So Mollie, tell us how, as busy working moms, can we make sure that we're not only giving time to our jobs and making sure we're successful, but also giving time to our significant others or spouses?
Yep. So time is like one of the most precious commodities. So I think this is a fantastic question to start with. I definitely think one of the most important things is to give yourself kudos for whatever you're doing to balance things just right now. It is like the most underrated step, but one of the most important. Like to just give yourself acknowledgement for like the way you're showing up for everyone. Because we only like have a limited amount of energy. And so to be able to even just give your kids a kiss on the cheek or the forehead or tell your partner, I love you. If like that's all you get done in your day because just like everything else consumes it, that is worth celebrating within itself. But let's go like 1 ounce further just so you have another actionable step besides the like notorious pat on the back here. It's really, really helpful when you're trying to find a connection time with your partner to think about what's going to give you guys the most fulfillment. So you know you and your partner the best, better than I ever could. And if you're not sure, you can always ask your partner about this. But if you can step back and think about when you felt like you had the most quality in your connection, whether that was by talking with one another or by doing an activity together or by just having physical affection, like hugging or cuddling, you guys have to define cuddles the best. They're mandatory for me too. I totally hear you. So you have to figure out what's the best method for you and then be able to integrate that as the priority rather than trying to do everything like the date night and being the best in every which way. You got to start somewhere. So start small by figuring out what's going to give you and your partner the most fulfillment.
And I love that because especially during this time with COVID and things being, everything isn't necessarily open and there's some restrictions at restaurants that you may not necessarily be able to go to a park and have a picnic or go to a restaurant and have a romantic, date night. Like, for example, my birthday is coming up. My husband's very good at picking like really nice romantic restaurants. But like I told him the other day, I was like, let's just hold off on it. Because, there's just that risk is there and you're just kind of like, oh, I really want to do that. I don't want to be that woman out there with Lysol wipes wiping down at this like a fancy French restaurant. Let me whip out my Ziploc bag with my Lysol wipes. They'll be like, ma'am, sorry. So I really love that tip. And you're so right that everybody's relationship is so different and on a different level. And there's different things that we enjoy as a couple. So I really do like that tip.
Yeah. And if you're not sure what it is for your partner, because you and your partner might have different definitions, like literally have that conversation of like, hey, I'm feeling like we get the most fulfillment out of cuddling at night together. And your partner might go, well, I love that. I also really appreciate actually when we like read a book together and then we talk about it. So having that dialogue, if you're not 100% certain, can save you time so that you find the middle ground. Okay, so that means we need to cuddle and do our book club together at night. You know what I mean?
I love it. It's so true because I think a lot of people are under the impression that you have to you have to be intimate in order to have that be quality time, but it's not true. Again, as busy moms, sometimes, if I found myself that I've done this in the past, and I just be very careful about this because after you put your kids to sleep, if you're like me, that's when I really get a chance to work. But at the same time, that's really the time when I have with my husband. So I've just been more aware that, hey, watch how much time I'm spending on the computer and, how much work I'm doing because I need to spend time with him. Because sometimes it's just like holding hands or like leaning on somebody and like watching a show. Yeah, I mean, it's not, these are not unattainable things. These are some of the simplest things that Mollie is helping us to realize today. So I really do love that. So let's throw some kids in the mix because, you have a working mama who's busy and we're already trying to be the best mama ever. And then you're a wife. And, studies have shown that a lot of times when kids come into the mix, husbands feel that their wives give more attention to their kids. And sometimes there is even a component of jealousy. And I know that's a hard thing to juggle just because, when you have kids, obviously you need attention. You can't leave, your baby in the tub. Wash yourself. I'll be right back. So how can moms address that so dads don't feel like that?
I love that because that tells me already that you're concerned about like your partner, right? If you're already wondering about this, you're already thinking like, how do I take care of my significant other even more, which is like such an important first step. And that might sound really basic, but okay. So I have an employee who works for me. And one of the things that she was saying to me today was like, wow, like we're trying to onboard new people. And she's like, wow, I can really tell the difference between someone who's responsible and just shows up and someone who like doesn't, like misses the mark, doesn't do their work. And like before even the exceptional skill level, like that's the baseline, right? And so I think we expect ourselves to be perfect partners and perfect parents. We're like actually hitting the baseline of being like attentive periodically, like nurturing periodically, loving periodically. Like that counts for so much. And there are so many partners and kids who just don't even get that baseline. So like being able to just like say, okay, I commit to sprinkling that into my romantic relationship as well as to my children can be such an important first step. And even this desire to do that or wonder how your partner's feeling counts for so much as well. And I love this question, but I'm going to switch it up just a little bit. So, so I don't love the idea, even though there's a ton of information around it, about like considering our partner's feelings, especially if we're in a heterosexual couple and you're thinking about your husband. Like I don't love the idea of thinking that they're jealous of your kids, right? For the most part, they may not be concretely thinking that they're jealous, but they may have needs that aren't being as met as they were when it was just the two of you, right? It's much simpler then. You have like time to get like wrapped up in you. How is my partner feeling? How is my partner thinking? And like when the kids are screaming your name, like it's just not right. You're like, oh, I gotta help my babies, right?
That's right.
Right. So I think being able to reframe it is like, okay, maybe your partner's feeling like part of their needs aren't being met, or that they're wanting more. And that doesn't mean that you have been not doing enough. It just means that your partner might feel a little deficient in what they need. So again, it always comes back to dialogue, because your partner is going to be able to define that for you way better than definitely better than I could, and maybe better than even you could, because they might have a good idea of like, if I could just get this from you, like if I could just get that 10 minutes before you pull up the laptop, like that would make me feel so good. Or it might be like, if I could just get a snuggle, like maybe some kind of fun play snuggle before we go to sleep, like your partner's got to tell you that, so that you're able to really show up for them in that way.
And I do like that. I do like the fact that you took it from not being jealous. And it's so true, because we don't want to look at it as something negative. And you're right. It's usually something very little and simple that we can do in order to fulfill that need. And I will say, I mean, I'm like a little jealous of my daughter, okay? So for you guys who don't know, I have 2 boys and a girl. And Alina, so anytime my husband and I either hold hands or kiss, like she literally comes between us. And then the other day I was telling him, I'm like, I feel like you hug her much longer than, you know what I mean? And then they have a little handshake and their own little like kiss. And I'm like, I see what's happening here. Because Matt and I, even when we dated, we like made up our own handshake. And I'm like, oh, you don't even do our handshake anymore, because now you have Alina. So it's so funny. So beware also, men, if you're watching, that you know your wives too, to also still pay attention. But I know I'm not jealous of my daughter. I love her, because you know what? I'm a daddy's girl. I'm still a daddy's girl. So Alina can be a daddy's girl all she wants. I like totally expect that.
Totally. And if you are grappling with jealousy, or like that is the feeling that's coming up for you, like, and the reframe that I shared doesn't really click for you yet, I think the other thing you can think about in that beautiful example that you just gave is also what your significant other is teaching your child. Like all the positive reinforcement and investment that they're giving, right? So now your daughter is going to know what it means to be treated well by a man in the future, and like expect nothing less. So like what a gift that's happening already. And so if you're struggling in that moment, be like, oh, I wish I got that. Being able to go like, well, we're really like rewarding our daughter's future and making your future life easier, so you don't have boyfriends coming over that you don't like. You know what I mean? You know, just by that
over here. Well, I love that. Well, again, as busy moms, working moms, a lot of times we get caught up in the rush of life, you know, other than work, with everything else that we do. What are some things that moms can keep an eye on to know early that their relationship is in trouble or something just needs to be addressed?
Yeah, I mean, there's many factors, but I think the simplest is trusting your gut. And when you kind of feel like something is off, being able to communicate about it. And if it feels like things have been rocky or icy or unclear for a while between the two of you, like that's a really good sign that there needs to be a discussion. And when discussions aren't happening, it tends to escalate things. And I know some people really feel counter to this, like the talking about the feeling or the problem makes it a bigger problem, but actually it really starts to increase. It's like a pot boiling in the background that you forget about. It actually is still like gonna go over the lid if you don't tend to it, even if you're in the other room. So it's really important to kind of come back and check in with your partner to go, hey, I feel like we used to cuddle a lot, or we had our handshake. Like, what happened to that? We're not doing that anymore. Like, I want to check in with you. Or I feel like we don't spend as much time together because the kids are running around and we're like doing 1,000 things. Like, I don't feel as like intimately bonded with you. And if you don't say intimately bonded, I don't feel so close with you, right? And just try to check about it and see.
They'll be like, what? What are you talking about? Why are you acting so weird?
Well, and I think what's really important is you're trying to get a sense of your partner's temperature. You want to get a sense of your temperature and your partner's temperature at all points, which is really like their internal thermometer of how they're feeling and how bonded the two of you are. So that's always a really great grounding place if you're feeling like things might not be so great right now.
And I love it. And one kind of recurring thing I hear you talking about is just how important that dialogue and that communication is, and just feeling each other out and knowing exactly what's happening, because assumptions can get you in trouble. I just want to say that.
Absolutely, 100%. And if you're confused about how to start conversations, I know I might be throwing this idea around a lot, and you might be like, well, it's really nerve-wracking. Like, I'm scared to bring up what's going on with this thing that's been sitting in the closet for a long time that we try not to talk about. I think it's really helpful to start with a self-date. That's what I call it. It's like a prep for you to figure out, like, what do I want to say? What's really eating at me? How do I want to explain it? And what's the thing I must get to in this conversation? So if the conversation goes everywhere, I have a grounding point to come back to so that we really can tease out where I'm not feeling like we're bonded anymore.
Yeah. And we also need to realize, just as moms, or even again, if there's any dads or guys watching, that you need to do a little self-reflection and self-assessment and realize, when you start that conversation, you don't want to blame anybody. A lot of times if somebody's feeling left out, or when you're busy, when you're busy, tired, we have a tendency to be a lot more irritable and on edge. So you don't want to take that out on your spouse at all. So you have to remember that when you're looking at something, definitely don't say, I feel like you aren't doing this or you aren't doing that. Make sure that you're saying or asking, hey, what can we do, and make it a team effort. What can we do in order to make this better? What can we do in order to spend more time together, and things like that. So don't go playing the blame game, because that'll just make it worse.
Spot on. Great advice, Dr. Mom.
So, of course, let's say we have somebody in a relationship that is kind of past rocky, and they've had a discussion and things really aren't getting better. What are some other things or steps that couples can take in order to try and salvage their relationship?
100%. I think most couples try their hardest on their own, right? Like, you read a blog, you listen to a podcast, you've tried to talk to your partner, and often where they get stuck is in that launching place of like, ooh, we probably need stronger reinforcements of this. Like, we've given it our all, but now we're at a wall. And I think the number one thing to remember is just because you're at that wall, it does not mean it's not salvageable. And that's like where the hopelessness really starts to kick in. And I see people start to fade in their relationship, even when the relationship's kind of fantastic. So it's a really helpful thing. And I know it's a big ask, but it's a really helpful thing to try and turn to further reinforcements when you've done everything in the house that you possibly can and you're still hitting that wall. So that can be inclusive of so many things based on like your own beliefs and ideology and what you think is important, right? You can go to a therapist, like a couples therapist. You can go to a spiritual advisor or a spiritual counselor. You can go to classes. There are a lot of now even online classes on how to improve your relationship. You can even buy like an online course where you don't have to see anyone or say anything to anyone. You can just like learn the information and do some practice activities along the way. So if you're hitting that wall, that is the time to get more support so you don't stay in that place of stuck, but you can really launch and move past it.
Yeah, and I love that. So, couples, remember that just because you've tried everything at home, don't be fooled, or don't let the stigma. I feel a lot of people, we all try to, with social media and everything, everybody tries to put on their best face, but I mean, we all know that everybody has hard times and everything is definitely not as perfect as social media depicts, because most of the times we're posting stuff like happy moments, our vacations, our new car. Those are the things we're posting. A lot of times people aren't posting like, I lost my job, or, I'm going through a hard time with my husband or my wife, whatever the case may be. So I think it's also important to realize, to kind of step over that stigma of like, oh, I don't want it to seem like my marriage is in trouble. Like if something is going on, like Mollie said, it's better to intervene sooner than later in order to salvage it. So I do like that, because just some statistics. I looked up some statistics from the Centers of Disease Control. That's my doctor thing. That's the Dr. Mom show.
Gotta have the stats, yeah.
So according to the CDC, there's 6.5 marriages for every 1,000 persons. But then there's also 2.9, so essentially three divorces per every 1,000 persons. So really, that's approximately 50% of marriages end up in divorce, which is quite a lot. That's like half. So that's saying like myself and my neighbor, if a couple's living next door to me, then one of us are probably going to get divorced. The chances of it is really high. And again, just to reiterate, the effects of a divorce, one, just on people as a couple, a wife and a husband, there's a lot of things. There's emotional instability that can occur, depression, anxiety, insomnia, financial instability. If one person was the breadwinner or making, a little bit more money than the other person. So there's a lot of things that come with divorce. So it is something I think it's just so important to, at the end of the day, to say that you've tried your hardest. And of course, I know there are reasons why people get divorced and it's like legitimate, but I feel to say like, oh, I feel like we fight too much, or, something that, it's different if you're fighting and there's physical abuse or something that's on a whole different level. But, I feel it's something that can be worked out. And if you all like love each other, we take vows, and I think it's something so important. I really feel marriage is something, and just relationships in general is very sacred, and on your wedding day, you take vows. This is a promise you make. And I personally, this is on a personal note, just feel very strongly about vows. And I don't think anybody would ever say marriage is easy. Relationships aren't easy. There's a lot of compromise. There's a lot of, you can't get your way. As women, I love getting my way whenever I can. But, you can't have your way all the time. And I think it's just good to be realistic when you're going into a long-term relationship or a more serious relationship or marriage, to realize that, you're committing to something. And then especially when you have kids, you have to remember that kids also get involved with divorce. There's so many studies out there also about how divorce affects children. There's a higher incidence of decrease in academic performance, school dropouts, just mood issues, mental issues. Also, kids feeling guilty, feeling like it was their fault that their parents separated. So I feel, Mollie being on here is just so important, because these are things that, not only affect us as busy working moms with our relationships, but also our relationships with our spouse and our children, because you want your kid, who doesn't want the best for their children? And of course, everybody's situation is so different. And I think ultimately, just to piggyback on what Mollie said, at the end of the day, wherever you are in your relationship, I think just try your hardest, whether it is reaching out to someone outside of your relationship to try and get help and salvage that relationship. Oh, yeah. I'm getting like emotional.
let me throw some more stats at you, because so at the Gottman Institute, who are like the John Julie Gottman are two of the biggest couples therapists in the U.S. and researchers of couples therapy, and they have a lot of really great stats, so you could look into that more. But one of the things that they notice is it takes sometimes couples approximately, often 6 years before they get help. So 6 years. Fighting and anxiety and depression, and your kids witnessing all of that, and no sleep at night, and hey, how it impacts your team at work if you have one. That's a lot of your life that could start to deteriorate. And the sooner you get support, the better. And like I said, get the support that works for you. And believe it or not, people don't even know this, you can get support even if you decide to go through a divorce. You can still do counseling together to decide to end amicably so that it's okay for your kids. So getting support, no matter what you ultimately want for the relationship, can be beneficial for basically your life and fulfillment.
Yeah. I can't believe that. I'm like, this is like jaw-dropping. that exactly half of my marriage, I've been married for 12 years. Like, it's going to be 12 years. And that's insane. That's a long time of just, like, not being happy. Like, coming home to that. So, see, and especially for, again, you career-driven moms out there, we know to be successful, it takes time. But if you work harder at something, that success comes faster. So the same thing applies to your marriage. Please do not be a statistic. 6 years before you get help. Definitely, break that chain and break that statistic, please. I'm gonna have to follow up with Mollie in like a couple of years and be like, please tell me, Mollie, that this number. Wow, that is mind-blowing, Mollie. Thank you for that. That is so, that's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, we're going to flip a little bit and talk about, moms and, being like a mompreneur. And we have a lot of female just entrepreneurs out there. And again, just busy working moms. Sometimes some women are the breadwinners for a family. And sometimes they may make more money than their husbands. And a lot of times, we know guys are like the strong ones, head of the household. And I think sometimes some guys can have their egos a little hurt if, their wife, some guys are like, oh, whatever, I'll be a trophy husband. I'm good with that. I'll stay at home. But there are also some spouses who are kind of like, oh, I really don't like the fact that you're making more than me or you're the breadwinner. What can women do in order to, ease that kind of like ego issue with their spouse if that is a concern?
Great question. So on my podcast, Next Level Relationships, which is on iTunes and Spotify, if you want to check it out, I did a few episodes on this. So I'm going to share some of the tidbits that I shared there on how to be like the breadwinner basically in the family and how to cope with that dynamic, especially if that dynamic changes, right? You brought up earlier, like if there's a job loss and maybe your partner was the breadwinner and all of a sudden you become the breadwinner, it can shift a lot of that dynamic and the power dynamic in the couple in the day-to-day. So one of the things that I think is super important is to figure out how you feel first about the situation. Are you feeling guilty? Are you feeling uncomfortable? Are you feeling frustrated that your partner's just not okay with it? Like, how do you feel first? Because that will set the tone for the whole conversation with your significant other. And if you can touch base on that, then that can be something you bring to your partner in the communication. Hey, I really appreciate, like if you were saying this to your partner, hey, I really appreciate that, you're excited about my recent bonus, my recent raise, the recent increase in revenue that we're experiencing. I'm also feeling kind of conflicted because sometimes I feel a little frustrated, that maybe my role as the provider right now is not really being accepted, right? So if you get that as your first step, it can be really helpful to have a further deepening conversation with your significant other. That being said, let's answer that second piece about like male ego and masculinity, right? If that's your dynamic, that you're husband and wife, and you're the wife as the breadwinner, I think it's really important to remember that your husband wants to be honored. They want to feel important. They want to feel like your significant other. And this may feel a little like an exaggeration, but I like to think about it as they want to feel like you're king, right? You want to feel like the queen. You want to feel like royalty together. So, right? Oh, every day, all the time. Why not feel like royalty, right? Okay. So it's really important that you start to think about how can I make my partner feel important, valued, essential, that like the king in this house. And a lot of what our society tells us and maybe what you've been saying in your household is that wrapped up around money, but there's a lot of other ways to make your partner feel very significant, right? So not downplaying the way they contribute, but really up-leveling and highlighting when they're helpful to you is essential. It's necessary for you to be able to show your partner that you really see them as cherished. And that's the most important piece.
Oh, I love that. I feel it's so important because, I feel as women, we are guilty. Women have a tendency of complaining more than men. And I feel sometimes, as wives, we're a little bit more guilty of complaining and especially keeping these things that have happened, and then where you're upset, you almost like dig those things from the past. And I feel men don't have a tendency to hold on to things, whereas women do. And I feel sometimes women or wives can almost be hurtful to their spouses because of that. So I love what you're saying, that to acknowledge what people are doing, because even with my husband's such a good husband, and I really try to tell him, like, hey, thanks for doing this. I mean, he does not have an issue with washing a dish or putting clothes in the laundry. And what's crazy is my dad is like that. So I grew up in a family like that. So thank you, Lord. God knew I needed somebody like that, because then I would be like, excuse me, sir, you need to do something in here. But yeah, I think that's so important to realize, because you're right. I think any one of us want to know a pat on the back, or to say like, hey, you're doing a good job, or you're appreciated. Because even as moms, most of the time, nobody's coming up to you and saying like, oh my gosh, you're such an awesome mom, and thanks for juggling 1,000 things. But it's nice sometimes to hear, even though it's expected that you're, taking care of your children, it's nice for somebody to say like, hey, like, you are always just taking such good care of your children, and, they're all alive,
Yeah. And not only am I going to echo that, because I've seen literally couples that were really fighting and in a bad place, all of a sudden saying that, like, everything changes, like everything melts. I'm going to give you gold right now. Let me add.
She's about to get your pen and papers right now.
So you might quickly go like, hey, thanks so much for washing the dish. Like, really appreciate it. You're awesome, right? That's giving the compliment, right? But if you kind of stop the movie, like you're on pause, almost like the spotlight is over just the two of you, and you put like a little touch of your hand on his arm, and you go, wow, you washing that dish right now makes me feel so taken care of. You make the kids and I feel like everything's going to be okay, and like you have our back all the time, even with this one dish. Thank you. Woo!
And then the clothes come flying off.
Exactly. You're welcome. There's the next kid. Good luck with that.
I love that. Put the spotlight on your spouse, and I love pausing to charge your spouse. And you can see just with Mollie how the two different ways she said it. Of course, the first way isn't wrong. Everybody loves a compliment, but I think there is something in kind of like stopping everything else and purposefully, like deliberately taking time out to say that. And there's something so special about the human touch. Like, we even learn that in medical school, that if somebody's crying, to put your hand on their leg or their shoulder. Even when we examine patients, like when you listen to their heart or their lungs, you put your arm on their shoulder, because there's a connection there. We're humans, and humans want to feel that connection. So yes, that's so important. Gold, people, gold. And I put on there, check out Mollie's podcast, Next Level Relationships. When does that come on, so I don't forget?
Yeah, so the episode's already aired. So go check it out right now. Don't wait a beat. after you watch the end of this show first. You got to
yes, of course. And then she may be giving some more gold tips, so. And then, so now can you just enlighten our viewers and listeners about what is the difference between a relationship and intimacy?
Ooh, this is a good question. So I think a relationship we want to define as just the connection between two people, right? But intimacy is when we go deeply. And I think a great parallel for this is your friendships, right? You have a relationship with an acquaintance, right? There's someone you've met before, maybe had coffee with them, but you're not about to tell them about the fight you just had with your husband, right? Like, you're not going to go there. You're going to talk about like how nice they look and like, the thing you just learned the other day on the internet, whatever. So it's really important to distinguish that is a relationship, but you're not intimately getting involved with that person and your emotions, right? So you can have a relationship with your partner, but intimacy is being like almost emotionally intertwined, where you're able to share fluidly with one another what's happening internally. And you know that there is trust and commitment from your partner to not only hold that, but also share it back in return.
Oh, girl, I got goosebumps. Oh, I love it. Isn't Mollie amazing? She is amazing. I love her. If you are a couple out there and, you just want to like sit and talk to somebody, or even if you're going through a rough patch, I mean, I would encourage you just to connect with her, even if you're like, oh, I don't want a relationship coach, but even just to connect with her and listen to her podcast, because she's got some gold nuggets she's giving right here. So I love that. Just that relationship, you have that connection, but that intimacy is something so much more intertwined, and you share everything, and that big word, trust. And it is very hard for people to trust other people, and that's true. That's why you have friends, you have acquaintances, and again, acquaintances you really don't like tell, even certain things that you would tell your friends, because it's that trust. You don't want somebody going around town telling your business. So I love it. Well, any final tips for our listeners and viewers, Mollie?
100%. Be kind to yourself. Own the fact that you're doing the best that you can, and also know it always can get richer. It always can get more fulfilling. There's so much more to keep discovering. There's so much more gold out there. So know that it can always get a little bit better.
And I love that. And it's so true. And again, Matt and I are going to 12 years of marriage, and I feel like we still learn things about each other that, we laugh about. And I think, that's one thing about relationships. It's good to laugh. Relationships don't have to be serious. I think it's fun to look at pictures or to reflect back on stuff that happens. Like, I have a tendency to just randomly do that when I'm like, remember when I did this? It's just funny. But so important. So I loved it. Again, you guys today, Mollie gave you guys so much information, and I feel like I have a pretty good marriage, but I feel she was even able to give me tips, like ways that I could improve. I'm going to be touching Matt's shoulder today and saying thank you, babe, for the triplets are in the back like, ah, I'll be like, thank you, babe, for watching the dishes tonight. It makes such a difference, and it helps me so much. So I'm going to make sure, because I will be honest, truth be told, I don't think I've ever done the pause part and truly done that. So I will make a more intentful effort to pause to let my husband know how awesome he is, and make sure you do the same. Again, if you guys want to connect with Mollie, of course, check out her podcast, Next Level Relationships. And then, of course, you can connect with Mollie on Instagram. And it's just her name, and Mollie, I'll let her say it. I don't want to mess with her last name.
Sure. Mollie Eliasof. You can also look up NYC Relationship Expert, and you can find me that way too. And DM me, send me a message. I want to hear from you, and I want to hear how I can help more. So I'm here for you.
And Mollie's so awesome, and I feel it's so nice to have somebody. And Mollie, I think one nice thing with relationship coaches, these individuals don't judge you. These individuals have probably heard everything. It's kind of like being a doctor. People coming in if their legs aren't shaved, and they're coming in for a pelvic exam. They're like, oh my gosh, my legs have stubble. And I'm just like, that doesn't even bother me, because I've seen so much stuff that I didn't even realize your legs weren't shaved until you said it. So just remember, as a relationship expert like Mollie, she's probably heard every single story and scenario. So she's probably an awesome person to talk to about your relationship, and she can obviously give so much insight to it. So please support her, connect with her, tune into her podcast. Also, don't forget, again, to subscribe to the Dr. Mom Show, to like, comment, and share the video, and also to connect with me on Instagram at the Dr. Mom Show, and also on Facebook at the Dr. Mom Show. So again, you guys be good, stay safe, love your partners. Don't forget to wash your hands, kiss your kids, love your families, and say your prayers. Good night. Thank you so much, Mollie, for being on this show. I had so much fun. I'm sure you're going to be back because I really enjoyed this. But thank you again, and you guys have a great night. Love you. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.